So what really makes a country wealthy? For the long haul. Is it all about natural resources, piles of factories, or is it something else entirely? Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest questions in economics as we go on this epic quest for the secret to long-term growth. For centuries, economists have been desperately searching for the answer. What is the secret sauce? The magic formula that separates countries that are just booming from the ones that are stuck in a rut. Well, that's the central mystery we're going to try and unravel today. Think of it like this. We're on the hunt for the engine of economic growth, and we're going to look at three major blueprints drawn up by some of the smartest minds out there. First, the Harrod-Domar model, then the Solow model, and finally what's called endogenous growth theory. Let's check out each attempt. Okay, so our first stop is with the real pioneers, Harrod and Domar. They built this ambitious first engine, but as you're about to see, it was, let's just say, a little precarious. So the big idea from Harrod and Domar was that investment is kind of a double-edged sword. On one side, when you spend money on new factories, it creates jobs and income, right? That's the demand side. But on the other side, those brand new factories boost the economy's ability to produce stuff. That's the supply side. The whole trick was trying to keep those two effects in perfect balance. And to get that balance, the model basically required a miracle. You had three different growth rates that all had to line up perfectly. There was the actual rate, what's actually happening. Then the warranted rate, that's the ideal speed to keep businesses happy and investing. And finally, the natural rate, which is the absolute maximum speed limit based on your population and technology. All three had to be exactly equal, which of course leads to the big critical question. I mean, in the real world, things are never perfect, are they? So what happens if these rates are just a little bit out of sync? Disaster. That's pretty much what happens. If the actual growth is just a tiny bit too slow, the economy just spirals into a depression. If it overshoots, even by a little, you get crazy runaway inflation. This brutal instability got a fitting name, the razor's edge. The fatal flaw was its really rigid assumption that you just couldn't swap machinery for workers or workers for machinery. The recipe was fixed, and any tiny deviation was, well, catastrophic. So yeah, that whole instability thing, it was a huge problem. And that brings us to our second attempt. An economist named Robert Solow looked at the wreckage of the razor's edge and basically said, okay, we can build a much more stable engine than that. Solow's big insight was actually pretty simple, but it was revolutionary. He said, of course you can substitute between capital and labor. If workers get too expensive, a business buys more machines. If capital is hard to come by, you hire more people. This flexibility, it acts like a shock absorber. It lets the economy automatically steer itself back towards a stable path, completely fixing that whole razor's edge problem. Now, this new stability leads to a really optimistic idea called the catch-up effect. The theory basically suggests that poorer countries, because they have less capital to start with, should actually grow faster than rich ones. So the thinking goes, if they have similar savings habits and access to the same technology, they'll all eventually converge. It was this really hopeful vision of a more equal world. But Solow's model had its own little puzzle. It showed that just saving and investing money isn't enough to keep growth going forever. Nope. The real driver, the secret to long-term prosperity, was technological progress. And here's the problem. The model had no idea where technology actually came from. It was what economists call exogenous. It basically just fell from the sky, like magic. A total mystery box, which, as you can imagine, isn't super helpful if you're trying to make policy. So this new generation of economists, they set out to pry open that mystery box. And this brings us to our third and final attempt, building an engine that actually creates its own power from the inside. Endogenous growth theory was a complete game changer. It argued that the most important ingredient for growth, technology, wasn't some random accident from the outside. No, it was the direct result of internal forces, things we can actually control and invest in, things like innovation, research, and maybe most important of all, human capital. We could finally actually engineer our own growth. So what powers this internal engine? Well, there were a few key ideas. Kenneth Arrow pointed to learning by doing. The more we make something, the better and more efficient we get at it. Robert Lucas, he focused on human capital, investing in people and education, and Paul Romer highlighted the raw power of new ideas. The crucial takeaway here is that growth isn't external. It's all about us. It's about people. All right, let's pull all this together. It's time for the ultimate cheat sheet, where we trace this amazing journey from a focus on physical stuff, on capital, all the way to the power of ideas. This table just lays it all out so clearly. You have Heradomar, which was rigid, unstable, living on that knife edge. Then Solo comes along and gives us stability, but leaves technology as this big external mystery box. And finally, endogenous theory brings it all home with a model of dynamic growth, driven from the inside by the very things that make us human, our ability to learn and our amazing ideas. You know, our whole search for this engine of growth shows this incredible evolution in economic thinking. We started with this fragile model built on physical capital. Then we moved to a more stable one, but it was powered by some mysterious outside force. And that led us to the final, really powerful realization. The engine isn't a machine. It's not some magic box. The engine is us. It's our ideas, our skills, our education. And that just leaves us with one last, really fascinating thought. If human creativity is the ultimate resource, if it's the true engine behind all prosperity, what's the next big idea that's going to change everything? What will you create?